Welcome to Sam Outside. I'm Sam and I'm outside wandering a chosen path. That's right. I have a number of trails and paths available for me to walk on every day, uh, mostly for walking the dog in a forest. It's not my property, but I've got access to this property. Now, there are a number of established trails for many different reasons. So, as a guide, I am sometimes asked, why this path? Where did this path come from? How long has it been here? Whose path is it? So to answer those questions, to answer the question of why I'm choosing to wander the forest on the path that I am today, most paths are not ours. And by ours, I mean human. Most of the trails, paths, even roads in my part of the world start as game trails. So the game trails are kept open often as animals need to access resources from one body of water or food source or sheltered area to another. And in my part of the world, they are often alongside sources of water. So game trails are often used quite heavily, consistently throughout different seasons. And those game trails eventually start being used as paths by people. Now, people tend to have a different kind of impact. I mean, literal impact, all right? So the path becomes something a little more substantial. The path becomes something that is a little easier to see, a little wider, and with consistent use, the ground starts to be compressed, changes from the consistency of the soil on either side. And that does affect the plant life, not only might wanting to be growing along the trail, but in the trail, it also affects the limbs and the branches. So there will start to be a natural opening. Over time, these footpaths became used by horses. And the horse path eventually became popular enough or needed enough to be used by a horse-drawn buggy. And the horse-drawn buggy gave way to the motor vehicle. And, as time went on. So in my part of the world, a lot of our secondary roads, major roads sometimes, they still follow traditional game trails from one body of water to another body of water or along a body of water. That differs greatly compared to very human engineered highways, call them interstates, if you will. That's your part of the world. They are very straight. There might be some need for incline and decline, but even that, there are great feats of engineering to try and conserve time and fuel consumption to get from point A to point B over long distances. But as soon as you get off those roads and you get into different kinds of terrain, most of those secondary roads stop following a grid and start following the landscape. From traditional horse and buggy, before that it was a horse, before that it was a footpath, before that it was a game trail. So for me, when I'm out in nature, I understand the path. I understand the terrain. I understand the other living things in this environment and what their needs are. So without having a path, it often doesn't take me that long to find a path. When I start to navigate the terrain, understanding flow of water, and where I might find the need for a safe passage from one body of water to another, consistently used by game animals. And it has not failed me. And over the course of a couple of years walking this dog, I have created a very substantial trail system. And other neighbors use it, so do guests. And so most trails in a conservation area, boardwalks, things like that, they will have had some engineering, some upgrades, some funds, responsibility, but at one time, many of the paths that we follow were not ours. They were part of the landscape, used by other living things to navigate in and around other living things to meet their needs. So today, I chose a path that brings me through nature, and I do have to navigate some terrain. And I do have to navigate some of the natural obstacles that lay across my path because it's not maintained, but it is heavily used by the dog and myself, by our neighbors, and by all the other living things in the forest. And we see signs of that everywhere, which helps me in my belief that I am one of those other living things that contributes to this part of the world, that contributes to this forest and what it takes to keep it accessed. And I often see my well-trod trails being used by other wildlife in winter because my trail will become a more navigable, energy efficient way to get from one part of a forest to another. When you don't have to trudge through 6 feet of freshly fallen snow, they'll use my path. And I see it also on our groomed snowmobile trails. We'll find populations of deer who find it easier to stay on those paths rather than find themselves subject to being stranded, loss of energy, loss of time, access to predation when there is too much snow. So that's why I choose to navigate and follow the paths that I do, because I understand what it takes to create a path and where that path is coming from and where it's going to. So if you don't find yourself on the right path, learn the terrain, learn other living things that share your space, and that will help you understand where it is you might need to be. Thank you for watching. I hope that helps. I need a raincoat. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.